Welcome to Downward Dogma, a podcast that explores and challenges today's authority system. Join us as we discuss the ingredients and functionality of our current framework and explore some possible solutions. Prepare to have your awareness of today's political terrain expanded. And now, your hostesses, Jennie and Sarah.
Hi, everybody. This is Jennie, and this is another episode of Downward Dogma. Thanks for joining us. And as usual, myself, Jennie McDaniel, followed by and with my excellent and wonderful friend, Sarah Murphy. Sarah, how are you doing?
I'm well. Let's just say it's been a day, but I'm still breathing, and so that's been. I listened to something the other day that was basically like, as long as you have your breath, you are okay. I'm like, okay, I still got it. I'm okay.
Excellent advice. And we have a very special guest, and she will be joining us either every other Thursday or once a month, whatever she feels is in alignment for her. We have the lovely Leslie Lyon. Leslie, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited about today.
Me too. And we'll get started by, of course, introducing ourselves. And we are Downward Dogma. We're on the podcast network, Third Eye Political Radio. You can find us there, and you can find us on Facebook. And you can also search our sister station, Heart Over Ego Radio. If you like how we talk about politics, you're really going to like how we talk about spirituality. And today we're going to talk about our new endeavor, as if we need another, but this one's a really potent one. And this one is going to come from all of our chakras, but specifically our lower chakras into our sacral and root chakras. This is what do they call that? A labor of passion or love. We are starting a new endeavor called Whore Magic, and it has a lot of angles to it. So I'm going to hand you over to Sarah, and Sarah's going to start us off, and we'll do a little explaining about what we're doing.
Yeah, so anybody who's listened to this podcast, probably from the very first episode, we talk a lot about dogma in its greatest, most controlling form, right, which is fear, guilt, and shame. And we have kind of dabbled, I think we've even done like pure episodes on the guilt, fear, and shame that come with the sexual side of society. And it just kept popping up in all of our conversations, and we've just been really called to it. And then, I couldn't even tell you the story about how Leslie, Jennie, and I ended up being the trio that we are. It just kind of happened. It wasn't there one day. It was the next day. And then through, conversations, Whore Magic was born. But, yeah, it was kind of like oh, my gosh, this is so perfect. But then it became like, no, this is our mission. This is actually like why we're here. We've talked about it a lot. Like, let's, cut away the noise and focus on this issue because we were made for this. And so Whore Magic, it's a little tongue-in-cheek. It's sassy. It's crass. It can be a little bit fun and in a way that hopefully disarms people around the dogma around sex and shame and fear and all of those things. We are currently on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We have a private group where people share their vulnerable questions and get the benefit of a community of people who hold space for them in a non-judgmental way. And our goal really is to kind of take on the darker, evil. I don't like to throw around the word evil because I think people do that regularly, but the darker side. And specifically, if we were to pick one cause that, profits from this endeavor is going to serve, it's going to be to end child trafficking, which has been in the news relatively recently for, I'm going to call it a conspiracy theory because there hasn't been any indication that any of it is true, but who would, if it was an ongoing investigation, give us that confirmation, but with Wayfair. And it's no secret that child trafficking happens. In the United States alone, 800,000 children go missing. 79% of all trafficking in the world is related to sexual exploitation, and the vast majority of that are children. So We believe that if we can start to heal people from their trauma, from the shame, the guilt, and the fear around sex, that we can actually start to deprogram pedophilia. I mean, that may sound crazy, but that's kind of our theory, and we're sticking to it.
It's our theory, and we're sticking to it, and it's our mission, and we're sticking to it. And it is an excellent mission, and it will be a marathon and not a sprint. You don't take on the powers that be that manage the roots of, let's call it, child trafficking, this disgusting energy. You don't take them on if you're weak. You don't take them on alone. You take them on as a group, and that's why we're forming the community, amongst other reasons, to gather other light workers, way showers, heartful beings who want to do their own internal healing so that can ripple out into the universe, and we can start making moves, like Sarah said, bolstering up, healing a society that's clearly sick. Between the pedophilia and the school shootings, and we don't have to go into any other topics because there's a lot of other ones too, but just between those two, there is something absolutely wrong with our emotion space and our sexuality. And I'll just use blanket statements like all of us, because we all need healing, some just in different levels than others. So we're tackling a very old, ancient, I'll even use some kitschy words, satanic energy that is physical, no doubt, but definitely has its hands in the physical from the ethereal. And we are spirit warriors, as well as sexual goddesses, as well as healers and teachers. So who better than us to start to form a crew, an army, a white buffalo army, if you will, to take on what we consider satanic energies in the ethereal that then trickle into the physical. So as a body worker, I know I can't just work on someone's muscles. I have to get into their relaxation space to bring out that yang, to get into those muscles. It's a double doozy, and it's a very complicated world we've incarnated in, so we're going to come at it from several angles. One, of course, being the videos and the courses we're going to be putting out. Another way, of course, is these podcasts, and you'll be hearing from us, and we would like you to invite your friends who are on the mission to end evil or ego energy and alchemize it into a more productive, heartful, beneficial energy for our community and society.
Yes, amazing. I think that the only thing I want to add to that is beautiful introductions is I feel like a little bit my contribution is to hold space for sure, and then add in this element of being triggered. All of us have triggers, and it's really something I think as a society we're really starting to recognize as a powerful tool to open ourselves up to why is that triggering me? What is that about? You know, there's tons of hysterical comedy about being offended, but in reality, all of that comes down to when you have a really strong emotional response to something, there's a reason. There's a deeper reason that we're wanting to look at. I happen to use a little bit of sass and humor in order to trigger people. And then I have this beautiful ability, we all do, to hold space for those people while they're triggered. And I really enjoy the process, even though the people I may be triggering are uncomfortable with it. I find it quite a fascinating psychological experiment, and I just feel like I get to be this great observer why people heal, including myself. Like I do this with myself, too. It's like a self-healing tool as well.
I love that. In my spiritual understandings, and when I hold space for my clients and students, I say, be the observer. Step out of the emotions. Don't negate the emotions. Don't stuff them. Feel them. They're yours. But step back out of that chaos of emotion space and be the observer and observe things from a more diplomatic space. You're going to make more conscious decisions and more direct, truthful decisions. In the middle of stress and anxiety, it's hard to think straight. So definitely panning out to be the observer is a brilliant spiritual lesson, really.
Yeah, 100%. I literally feel like I'm remembering what I've always done for lifetime after lifetime. And I had a really interesting question in my private messages yesterday that was like, how did you come to know this? And I was like, I don't know. I just always have.
Yep. That's that discernment, that resonance. You feel your truth resonate through your whole body. And some things can be some truths and full truths and half truths and truths for some time, and then they're not truths anymore. So it's just letting your body feel what resonates with you. And it's another spiritual practice that's easier said than done because, again, stresses and anxieties and social expectations and political nonsense get into that space where we start to stress, and then that kind of jiggles our view. And again, the idea of coming to existence is to experience this, but then to come in and alchemize stress and anxiety into a more lighter existence so we can have more ease and grace. With ease and grace brings ease and grace, and we start to see things from a more lighter perception or perspective. And that's what it's all about, is changing and lightening the perspective. And that's what we're doing Horror Magic. The stigma around sexuality and sex was put there for a reason. It was put there to keep that energy at bay. There's a lot of power in the orgasm. There's a lot of power in sexuality. There's a lot of power in intimacy. And the churches saw this. They saw this with the pagans doing their rituals and doing their just spells and making things happen and move. And so the church says, oh, no, or the powers that be, they might be the same people at that point, said, oh, no, you can't have that kind of power. We would prefer you to be eating shame and fear and guilt. Then you're manageable. Then we get to manipulate you, and you become our minions, and you spout our propaganda. That's called manipulation, and it's as old as the dirt that we stand on.
100%. Our religious systems are literally just a training ground for us to give up their power to whomever wants it.
And then with
100.
that comes sexual. Go ahead, Sarah. I'm sorry.
No, I was literally just saying, 100. I mean, just the mere fact that religion puts it's like you are connected. Literally, I mean, our belief is that you are the divine, but they put a person in between you and your access to God. And they fill your life through all of these qualifiers. Like, if you don't do this and you don't do this and you promise to do this and you promise to do this, then God will love you. Then you'll be led into this, right? Like, there's all these stipulations around love. Well, what love do you know of that has stipulations and is a healthy love? I don't know of any.
None. 100% agreement.
It's a power play.
It is. And then they're like, you have an all-forgiving God, but yet we're going to put all kinds of rules and stipulations. It's so human ego. It's so, the Bible has human ego written all over it. I think we've teased before on the show and said, it was poorly written. I'll give it a D+. It wasn't. That's not good. Yeah. That's not great. Someone needs to edit that. Hell, maybe we will, or maybe bring something better to the table. Who knows, right? So, ladies, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I didn't get a chance to because I was in and out of session all day, but I noticed that I had gotten a message from both of you or one of you about porn and the trafficking, both industries being very different, but there are some connections. And I know we're never shaming anyone for looking at porn or watching porn, enjoying porn. None of that. That won't be here. But we did want to bring to the table some of maybe the darker sides that we can shine a light on. And I didn't get a chance to read that article, so I'm going to hand it over to one of you ladies to kind of maybe give us some cliff notes.
Yeah, I'll start with this. Not that I was unaware that child sex trafficking was a thing. I guess I just kind of fell down the rabbit hole, as is the way I just operate when a topic kind of grasps my attention. And so when the Wayfair thing kind of started going viral, I obviously fell down the rabbit hole, and in a way that, like, just to this day has changed me forever. I think that the media does a really good job of not covering it regularly, probably for obvious reasons. Like, who wants to hear that every day, right? And it's just horrible. So of course I started to look into things like, what can I do? What can we do to assist, aside from providing money to the nonprofits that are doing the really hard work. And one of the major things that came up time and time again on site after site is to stop watching porn, which the theory there is that porn actually feeds in, or child trafficking in general, human trafficking, feeds the porn industry. And so, like, I have this quote here from an article written on the National Review back in 2018. It says, if someone contributed even one view to the 28.5 billion views of free porn online in the last year, he or she may have watched a victim of sex trafficking appearing under duress on camera. That's just staggering. 28.5 billion views of free porn in a year, and the chances are that even if they only watched one, the chances are good that the person on camera was under duress. It's right. It's an easy solution. Just stop watching porn. How do you get people to stop watching 28.5 billion views of something, right? And more so than that, I mean, we could talk about porn, and I think we all have we've talked about porn before, especially like the average age of men being exposed to porn is 13, right? So like if you're 13 years old and you're watching porn, chances are you're not watching it because you're like, woo, yeah, like I remember this one time, this is so like, reminiscent. No, it's because they're like, how does the sex thing work? Like, I like this girl. I'm not even sure what to do. And that's not a great foundation for that type of knowledge, right? Because we all know that's not how it looks, sounds, nothing about that is accurate. So as we have kind of started Horror Magic and started engaging with people about, freeing themselves of the shame, fear, and guilt that's associated with sex, there's a line we have to walk there because porn is a big part of sex culture. No matter, we can't just pretend it's not there. So my question this morning when I shared, I think it was just like a Facebook post, but it gave a whole bunch of stats that basically talked about how and why trafficking feeds porn and vice versa, right? And the worst example that I can think of is one that I read was a 6-month-old baby was sold on Craigslist for a sexual experience by her parents, and they filmed the engagement, and then that became porn. So not only was she sexually abused, but that actually became something they sold on. I don't know what site they would have sold it on, but that they made money off of the videotaping of it, right? And so that's a worst case scenario, but a perhaps less egregious, although I don't ever want to discount this, would be girls who are convinced that into the modeling, right? And then they find themselves in precarious situations doing, modeling, and they don't want to necessarily do what they're being asked to do, but they're being told that they'll be a star. And so they do, and they may be 16, 17, whatever it might be. But there's something about that hesitation and that discomfort that some people find really arousing. And so it makes good porn, right? But we are going to have this conversation here because we recognize that, one, not all porn is created equal, right? Like, right. And Leslie actually is the one that started saying this on Horror Magic, is we're not here to shame anybody for watching porn. I think everybody here has watched porn, right? So we certainly can't be like holier than thou, right? There's likely a place for it, but there needs to be a conversation around it if we are going to kind of come out and say, look, we're here to end child sex trafficking, and we're going to take on, the forces that be, the energies that kind of create that reality. But we're also not going to shame you for porn. And I think there is probably a line there, but I think it's worth a discussion.
100%. So I think my view on this is broad, but there's also a few key points, like the family disruption and dysfunction that allows some of this child sex trafficking is something that as a society we all need to look at. And the part of us that as a group, when we're saying, we're not going to judge you for watching porn, what we're saying is like, I want to call it G-rated porn, but none of it is, the more, quote, acceptable pornography. And I think some of the key indicators of trafficking and someone is they're either drugged, they're in a situation where there's not the consent, there is that question of their comfort level. It's not. I think those parts are really hard to discern. Like, we all like to assume that nobody's going to purchase or want to watch that pornography of that tiny little child. But the reality is, if they sold it, that is in demand. And that's the part of our society that needs the shift, that needs some light in it, that needs to be alchemized, that needs to be talked about and looked at. We're not going to shame you for your vanilla sex porn likes and dislikes. It's not about that. They're two separate discussions. And one of the things that I really struggle with, and I read the article, the little Facebook post that you sent, and one of the stats at the bottom is 56% of divorce cases involve one party with an obsessive interest in pornographic websites. And I'm super curious where that came from. But then I also want to discuss the part of that views, because there is a part of me that doesn't view porn in the same light as what we're discussing that happened to that child. There's two separate categories. So in my mind, I want to understand, because there is so much shame around sexuality and there's so much possession in relationships, that if a man is looking at another woman and masturbating to it, his partner could be jealous over that, where you guys could have a conversation that could add to your relationship instead of being more possessive. Those are the types of conversations I want to see people have.
Brilliant. Yeah. And that's opening up the doorways to a more conducive, depthful experience with another human being, is allowing yourself to be vulnerable and then letting them be vulnerable, trying not to trigger or project or deflect, and listening and holding space. I think we had a lovely member say, either in text when we were doing our live yesterday, or in the group, saying that how does she tell her husband she has sex toys? And I think you guys gave great information, which was making an experience that includes him and fun. And if the idea that, he expresses, well, that makes me not good enough, or I'm not enough for you, then you turn the wheel and say, that's not the idea at all. The idea is it's fun and playful and adds, and it's a tool, and it's like anything you would add, a cocktail to happy hour, dessert to dinner. It's something that you add. And you're giving your partner an opportunity, and if they're of heartful mind and want to heal, which, not all of us always are, but they'll look at their vulnerability and their insecurity and say, well, where would that idea of I'm not enough come from? And that was just the catalyst. The toy or the sexual toy or what have you was a catalyst that if that man is having bad or triggered responses around something that's just an object, then there's that inside of him, and he can get a chance to talk about that and bolster that and heal that. And that's what I like to see is that I like to see all the healings, of course, but I definitely like to see that emotional vulnerability be exposed, looked at, and then healed, which means we get freedom. So when your partner takes a look, whether they're masturbating or not, at another woman, you know where you stand, and you have that self-worth and self-compassion and self-strength and confidence. And that's what heals insecurity, and that's what gives us freedom. So easier said than done, all of this stuff. This is, could take weeks or months or years, kind of bringing this to the table and getting comfortable with talking about it.
Yeah. You know what I'd really like to see, and we see this I'm going to use the food industry because I'm from that side of things, right? So there was a time when, I guess maybe back in the mid-2000s, between 2005, 2007, on Long Island, when people were like, geez, factory farms are really bad, and so we should have local farms that we can inspect, we know the farmer, and so chefs started doing that, right? And so you'd see that on the menus, it's locally sourced from Happy Valley Farms in Sagaponack or whatever, right?
Right.
Why can't we see more of that in porn, where there's this transparency?
This is a huge idea. Huge idea. I've said all along, if you got women involved in the production of porn, your stats are going to skyrocket, because we we don't operate the way a lot of this porn is presented. And I think that this is a really great idea for an above board look at it. I love that, Sarah.
Like, let's ensure that everyone has freaking health insurance, right? Because let's be honest, like this is a risky profession. Make sure everybody's got health insurance. They're getting their workers' comp. They are of age. They are paid, proportionately for the talent. These are talent, right? Like, let's ensure, maybe they even have a damn union, but you know what that would require?
Awesome.
It would require us taking this shit out from the shadows and stop pretending like this is a dirty industry. It has been around as long as men have had penises. You know what I mean? As long as women have had vaginas, there has been porn, there has been prostitution. It's never going away. So why do we continue to pretend like it's this evil thing that needs to happen in the back of a dirty dumpster? Like I don't understand it. But here we are, and we're seeing the dark side of it. And in our quest to kind of end child trafficking, I feel like we need to pull forward a lot of this other garbage, right?
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it all comes down to money in the end. There's one statistic that I'm reading here online that says the International Labor Organization says forced labor generates $150 billion in illegal profits per year. That's ultimately what this comes down to. That's not just porn. That's domestic work, agricultural, child labor, all of the above. But we're talking money.
And going into the pockets of people who have a lot of power and pull a lot of strings quite often. So things don't get investigated as they should. The media doesn't get every news alert about a missing child. If we did, it'd be constantly going off and we'd be in a state of panic. Instead, it's coronavirus. 2 people died yesterday. And again, not negating the importance of being cautious with coronavirus and things of this nature, but there is some mechanisms at play, and I think we need to get it out from the shadows, like Sarah said. And when you were sharing the story about the young 6-month-old baby being sold for, good God, it blew my mind. And then I started thinking regulation. I was like, we need to regulate the porn industry like we've regulated organic food, like we've regulated toxins thrown into the water.
We've regulated abortion, and it really has cut down on that backstreet weird situation stuff.
Yes, that is dangerous. That is not good. We need to bring it to the light.
That's right.
Get some unions going for these sex workers. Like Sarah said, there's never been a time that there hasn't been some level of trade for sex in some way, and it is the oldest profession known to man, prostitution. And it's been around. It's not going anywhere. And that brings me to an interesting topic I had at my breakfast table. My boyfriend said, I think we were talking about like Thailand area. I don't know exactly. We were just kind of like pointing to a different part of the world. So over in that area, he was saying, it's very uncommon to have mass shootings and public shootings over there. I see some commonalities with spicy food and their sex laws. Now, that's all debatable, and I'm sure there's all kinds of trafficking going on over there, and that definitely needs to be managed. But just looking at the idea of sexual release trickling into how we behave into public or just at home or what have you. And I thought that was an interesting correlation between sex laws, spicy food, and lack of public killings, let's call it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is an interesting correlation.
I loved when you sent that, because my favorite saying is correlation does not equal causation, because it is super easy to be like, but hey, look, like these things obviously are related. And I think if you look at literally anywhere in the world, they don't have mass shootings like we have mass shootings. And obviously lots of places have much stricter laws on some things and much laxer laws on others. But I will say that if you were going to look at, people who are, for lack of a better term, sexually frustrated, we'd probably rank pretty high on that. You know what I mean? I'm just taking a guess here, but I'm guessing our Puritan roots really feed that, because, even in our private group, And again, we just started it yesterday, like maybe 24 hours ago. And so the conversations that are being had in there, they're just amazing, and how vulnerable people are being, and also how others are contributing to the conversation. Like, people are holding space like fucking bosses, and I love it. But we have people with shame or vulnerability around some things that were just like, where did you pick this up? Who told you this was wrong? You know, I think on one of the earlier episodes, I shared a story about, a grown man who's always felt shame around masturbating because he was told that, he'd go to hell or something if he did. And he's an adult now, and he recognizes the kind of weirdness or the, insanity that actually, like, but it was in his little boy head, and so he still feels that shame, even though he's able to logically, like, realize that's not the case, right? So
a lot of times too, I just feel like we as humans need a space where we can kind of unpack those thoughts that's safe, and we can just hear ourselves think that and say that, and have someone just be there with us and be like, there's nothing wrong with what you're choosing to do. You're not hurting anybody. You're not crossing any boundaries. There's no consent issues. You have respect for yourself and others. Like, there's nothing in this that's lacking. And I think sometimes that's just all we need in order for us to progress in our healing. And that's really like our mission to a T.
Right. Exactly.
There's a cool meme. It says, people begin to heal the second they feel heard. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And that's what we want, is for people to be heard and other people to hear you too and have their responses, and we all help each other as a community. And I can't believe the amount of activity we've had on our Facebook pages in just a few short days that we've been playing around with this. So it's definitely showing the need, the desire, and I'm just really excited to play with it. I've been a professional healer for most of my adult life, and this is definitely taking me into a different angle, but I am incredibly excited about it, and I feel like this is my life calling. So my passion is like full busted open and full blown, and I can see that both of yours is too, and I think that is not only is the term horror magic catchy, but we're coming in with all the solar plexus and chakral energy to put behind it. And it's like, you can have a good storyline, but if the actresses don't, or actors, whatever, don't perform it in such a vigor or passion space, then it's just okay. And so I think we have a lot of the pieces to make this a very powerful movement that will get a lot of momentum. And I'm excited about it. I can't think of a more cool job to have, I'll tell you what.
Seriously. So this one article I'm reading is talking about the three P's to stop human trafficking, and I really love this: prevent trafficking, protect victims, and prosecute traffickers. And to be frank, we kind of suck at all three of those.
Yes, especially the prosecuting part. Oh my gosh, if we could just break that down for a second. So even if they have if the victims have the ability, the wherewithal, the courage to go and seek assistance from law enforcement, or go to the ER, whatever it is. Sometimes you go months after, and then
or even the opportunity to go.
Or even the opportunity. I mean, I was literally talking with someone the other day who was human trafficked. The only reason she was able to get out of that situation is she saw the open door and she barefoot took the opportunity, and she ran as a little 14-year-old girl until she literally convinced a bus driver to let her on the bus without payment or a ticket, and she was able to get back to safety. But I mean,
crazy.
Once they get away, it's an uphill battle, like, because it's like, and then it's he say, she said, or it's just these rape kits are going untested for decades. Right. It is just shameful.
It's
shameful.
It's maddening how the system works. Obviously, I went through the system with a different experience, but having walked through it over the last 4 years, I learned some really valuable lessons. The law is not there for the victim. The law is literally there to uphold the law. That's it. There's no emotion. There's nothing else. If there is no backing for the law to be upheld, the system doesn't work.
Right. And the system literally is there to protect every individual until proven guilty. Yeah. So everybody walks around with assumed innocence unless you have proof. And if you are a sexual assault victim or you are a trafficking victim and you've got nothing, you've got nothing. There's nothing to be prosecuted, right? And so without, collective efforts on law enforcement's part or these nonprofits that are out there doing really difficult work on the hind end, it's so easy to just hide in the shadows with this.
I think it makes people feel very uncomfortable, like it should, because it's unpleasant. It's a very natural response. But like us three say, if it doesn't make you uncomfortable or freak you out, it's not worth anything, or it's not worth much or pursuing. The trigger that is a deep wound that is covered by shame, that we have to get through that shame to get to the root of the issue, which is whatever it is, fear, power, control, whatever it is. So this is an unveiling where healing is like a onion. It's layered. You just keep going, and sometimes you hit a spot where you don't do a lot of healing, or you don't experience a lot of kickbacks from your healing, and then you'll start to heal a couple years later from it. It's very layered, and it will pop up. And I think that I hear a lot from my clients. I definitely hear a lot from my clients, them saying, but I already worked on that. I'm like, you have to stop in this linear thing. I know it's very common for our brains to go that way because they go that way. But we have to look at it like each layer we get to, there may be a little more to unfold or unpack, or because our mind has a really brilliant way of protecting us. And it does that to keep us from going into trauma and shock that is puts us into complete rehabilitation mode. But what we do is we often will store memories that our mind protects us from. It can be a dog dying, a family dog dying. It can be a family member dying. It can be being raped. It can be being molested. It can be anything. We store that away to when we're at a place where we can emotionally balance and manage that trauma. So very commonly, I'll say, well, you did that healing for that decade, and now it's coming forward to another decade and being brought to the table from another angle, and usually much more deep. And it's giving you the opportunity to get deeper into that womb. When we know better, we do better. That's Maya Angelou. She was brilliant with the self-care and self-help, and she's a brilliant woman. But yes, it's layered, and we would be foolish to think that just one go at anything would master it. So I think that the future is going to call for some diligence. How about you guys? Do you think it's going to call for some diligence and courage?
Definitely. Go ahead, Sarah.
No, I was just going to say, the hardest part about what we're aiming to do is that we're going to be putting up a giant fucking mirror in front of people. And that's the hardest healing, right? Even just the mere fact that, like, we're talking about porn and how it feeds the traffic. Well, everybody is grossed out by trafficking, but everyone also has watched porn. So, like, you got to take a look in the mirror there, and that hurts. It feels uncomfortable. And so your first reaction is going to be like, oh, well, I mean, porn isn't that bad, right? And it's not in and of itself, right? Like we've already discussed, like porn in and of itself, there's, unless you are specifically seeking out child porn, right? Like then it's kind of like a byproduct, which is unfortunate. But when you know better, you do better. And so, like, that's what's going to be the hardest part about what we are asking people to do. Is we're asking not people to look around and point fingers and solve this by going over in this direction or putting your money over here. We're asking people to look at themselves. We're asking people to do their own healing, because that's the only way that we make the impact that we are the only impact that we're trying to have is on the individual level, so that it can reverberate out onto the societal level. And that, I think, is just the hardest part.
I think that is ultimately the key. Like, we as humans tend to get a little bit overwhelmed. It is such a huge issue, and what can I do as an individual? But the reality is, if each individual does whatever they can do. Maybe you're not going to get on a podcast like us three and start a Horror Magic Facebook page and have difficult conversations. That's not what we're asking of you. But do something. You have money, you have resources, you have time. Do something in order to help prevent or to help someone heal or to hold space for conversation. Anything is better than nothing. The individual holds great power as a collective.
Absolutely. And there was a movie that came out several years ago, and it was called, I think, Spotlight. And it was a branch of the Washington Post. We're doing some research on the Catholic Church, and they were just digging up all kinds of stuff. And this was like, I think, I watched it, about 4 or 5 years ago, but I think it was taking place maybe the beginning of the 2000s there or something. But they basically published an article in the Washington Post about the church hurting people, and they were bringing forth people with their stories, and they were basically spotlighting them. They were just calling them out. And the Catholic Church, of course, denied everything, and even the followers were denying it, being like, oh, no, even if their own kids were saying that they were molested, the parents were so brainwashed with the church that they continued going to the same exact church that their son was molested in for years. So they were spotlighting on all the brainwashing and dogma and protection and what have you that goes into, I guess, protecting and hiding and shielding these people. This happened to be a religious sect, the Catholic Church, a pretty big one nonetheless, but this happens in smaller spiritual sects. This happens in politics. This happens in Hollywood, the Harvey Weinstein, the couch calls or whatever they call it. So they say, well, come over here, young lady. Let's see if we can get you in the movies, right? We'll get you in the pictures. No, that's abuse, and it's disgusting. So I'm glad that we're shining a light on it, because this is what happened in that movie, The Spotlight. They really just brought it out of the table, and people were being able to come out of the darkness and get healed, whether their parents wanted to stop going to the Satanistic type church or not. They were able to come forward and get support and get some recognition and find each other, because what it came down to, it was like a percentage of priests. So I think they were in Boston during some of this research, or a lot of it, and it was like 1 or 2%, which sounds like not a lot, but there were 9,000 preachers in the area, and 9,000 or something like that, I can't remember the exact numbers, 1% of that are 90 pedophiles hurting kids for decades. That's too many. One is too many. And it's just, I loved how they really just dug up the dirt and just plastered it all over, the Washington Post, and I'm sure other groups picked it up too. But if you get a chance, watch that Spotlight movie. You'll like how their strategy to bring that disgustingness to the table was just executed perfectly, kind of like what we're doing, I think.
And that movie was really, it stuck with me for a long time.
Me too.
But it reminded me of when I was living in D.C., I lived for a year in this one area called Cathedral Heights, which is kind of like a ritzy area. The metro didn't go there on purpose, because the rich people didn't want, people taking the metro to their area. But I used to run on Embassy Row. And so Embassy Row obviously is exactly what you think it is. It's all of the world embassies kind of right next to each other. It's beautiful. Everything's all well landscaped. And this dude, older man, I don't know his story, but everyone has a story about his story, right? He's like that person who's just like, everyone has their own little tale about who he is. And I think the newspaper had run a few stories on him. Every day, without fail, he would be out there in the kind of, I think it's the bicycle lane, really, which was public property, so not on the embassy. He had one side of his big old sign tied to a tree, and the other side he would hold, and he would just shake it during rush hour. And it said, the Catholic Church is full of pedophiles. And he would just stand there and shake that sign every day. And everybody else had kind of gotten over it, right? It was out of the newspapers for years by this point. But he was not going to let it be forgotten that the Catholic Church is full of pedophiles. And, I mean, that's kind of what we're asking people to do. We're asking people to not continue to just look past it. If it's out of the newspaper, it doesn't mean it's not a problem. Everybody can do something. You don't have to tie a sign to this tree and hang out there every day during rush hour, but you could.
Yes, you could. And if you have the time and space to do that, that's your part. That's awesome.
Right. Exactly.
And, I've heard of a couple pedophiles getting prosecuted because of fellow humans around them. For example, the one story I'm thinking of, and I've heard a couple of them like this, but one woman was in a row behind a gentleman who was getting texts of a couple of young people. And she just got a bad vibe from him, so she called the police and said, I think I got a pedophile here. He's gotten, some suspicious-looking pictures, and I can see through, I'm sitting on a plane behind him. Well, the authorities were there, and they got into his phone, and he was a fucking pedophile. And that was a hero without a cape, probably going on a vacation or going somewhere for work or whatever she was doing on that plane. Just being aware of our surroundings, and you don't have to be nosy looking at everyone's stuff, but if you catch something odd or suspicious, bring some awareness to it. And you don't have to shout out pedophile, and, you can just bring some awareness to the authorities like that woman did. She's like, that could have been his grandkids, but she said, I got a bad vibe. And so he was a pedophile,
Yeah.
So we can keep an eye out. We can maybe look for, like I do when I look for organic vegetables and meats and stuff. I see where they're coming from. Maybe we can start being more aware of where we're getting our viewing material. We can start being picky like that. Look back at the beginning of 2000s when there was hardly any organic foods in the store, let alone all the gluten-free foods that are in the store. We had a demand. The market supplied, and we can do that with any market, really, is demand. We want this, and we want it to look like this, and withhold our spending, which is what they want. They want our money, so they're going to bend and flex to that almighty dollar. We want them to end trafficking. They're like, okay, just keep paying us. We'll do our part. Whatever it takes. I don't care.
Somewhere I was reading an article about how they have a gallery of pictures of different hotel rooms where trafficked situations are happening, whether it's pornography or different selling of human traffickers. And they have like the background of the hotel, and they're matching it up with all these different hotel pictures that people send in from being at certain hotels so they can track these people. And I thought, that's awesome. All you have to do is take a picture of the hotel you're in and upload it to this website, and then they have a gallery to compare pictures to. I thought, wow, that's genius. That is using the internet creatively.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Have you guys seen, and this is kind of on topic only a little bit, the Netflix documentary called Don't Fuck with Cats? It's basically a bunch of, it's basically the people in this, they're just like you and me, but they are a little bit tech savvier. And there was this video where this dude stuck a kitten in a vacuum bag and killed it and put it out there on the web. And nobody took it really seriously, but these cat lovers really did. And yeah, and so I'm not going to give it away, but long story short, like this dude actually starts escalating, and he's like bouncing all over Europe, but like these just random sleuths are like tracking his activity, and they are basically trying to like match up door handles so they can figure out where he is and like what part of looking at outlets, trying to figure out what country he's in, and because he would do these videos, right? And so like every little thing was a clue. Yeah, it was. That just reminded me of it. But yeah, so like even if the only part that you're playing in this is like taking pictures of your hotel room, or if the only part you're playing in this is working on your own issues, your own sexual trauma, your own, shame, guilt, and fear, you're doing the good work.
Yeah, our healing leads to the collective healing.
I love how powerful the internet can be. It reminds me of all these Karens that are getting videotaped being racist assholes. We're like, internet, do your thing. They lose their job, they lose their marriage, because you don't get to be a racist and everyone be cool with it. It's getting to a point where everyone's got a camera and the video on their phone, and if you're going to be a dick, they're going to video it. And if you're so oblivious to them videoing you and not caring, this is showing some psychological problems that need to be addressed. So I'm glad the internet is doing things like taking pictures of doorknobs and hotel rooms and Karens and putting it into the universe, or in the universe, yes, but definitely the internet, and in the internet doing its job, even if we don't get to go out and pick it because we got a day job and we don't get a lot of time and kids and stuff. We can do our part by just doing little things like doorknobs and pictures of hotels, but then also looking at our own traumas. Be the change you wish to see in the world. That's where the healing is magical, is when you look at your own issues and desire to nurture them and heal them, you will get freedom from those stressors, often stressors you don't even know are there, or maybe you do know they're there, but that ripples out into the universe or the ethers or around you, to the people around you. So that is where all change often happens, with perception and our own internal reflections. Do we have to constantly be bashing ourselves about the things we need to work on? No, I don't recommend that. I do, however, recommend taking a glance at what brings up shame and guilt, because those are the triggers, those are the catalysts of getting into that seed, taking it further down. It might go into childhood. It might just be because it's a yucky feeling for you. Everyone's different, and as long as we take the time to glance and look, that means we're showing care and compassion for ourselves, and the universe backs all of our energies we put out. So then you're getting double time from the universe. I don't quote the Bible very often, but there's a couple sayings I do like, and one of which is, God helps them who helps themselves.
Yeah, definitely.
Totally.
Ladies, should we wrap this present up and head on out? All right, since we're doing so many events during the week, we'll wrap this one up. Sometimes we'll go for an hour, sometimes we'll go for a half hour, 45 minutes. It's an exciting, who knows what's happening, and we'll keep it as a surprise, but usually it's going to be around 45 minutes. We appreciate you all for joining us. This is Horror Magic doing Downward Dogma. Today we covered porn and trafficking, amongst other things, so go ahead and look at all of our archived episodes. You will find plenty of Downward Dogma, and you'll find our very first pilot episode of Horror Magic podcast on Third Eye Political Radio, and we probably will be changing up platforms, but for now you can find us there. And of course, go to our Facebook and Instagram pages, Horror Magic, and you can also find us in our special group, our special community called Team Horrior. And what were other words behind Team Horrior? And are there other words? That just might be the title. It's Home Team Horrior. Yeah, you'll find it there. And join, and we want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts, and we want to have you join in on the conversation. So, ladies, it's been a pleasure. Any closing thoughts from either of you?
Yeah. So, if anybody needs a reason to join Team Horrior, we did an amazing new moon live that is currently in the group. Jennie takes us through a little chakra clearing. I kind of give a little information on the Cancer new moon and my favorite new moon ritual. And then Leslie actually closed us out with a masturbation meditation on how to clear your chakras that way. And so, I mean, for the first day of our group, I feel like we provided some really awesome value. And so if anyone's interested in a reason to join the group, that alone, I think, is worth it.
Yeah. Search Team Horrior and be a Horrior, a hoe warrior, a hooker warrior, however you want to look at it. One who brings awareness to sexuality, breaks down constructs, and starts to heal and break down that shame and have pride and lust and love and excitement around our sexuality. That's the design of the energy that should be around it and what it projects and what it produces. So we appreciate you all, and until next time, have a good week.
Yes.
Bye.